Hello and welcome to this Fantasy Grounds video. In this video, I'm going to be creating my own structure in the Immersive Stronghold art pack, which I will then export and use in the same area that I have used previously to create a top-down and forward-facing image. I'm going to be creating a tower. And so the first element that I'm going to create will be the top-down view of the tower itself. I'm just going to make it very simple right now. Just for the demonstration purposes, but you can add as much detail as you want and spend as much time on it as you wish. The more time that you spend on something, obviously, the more detail that you can place into it. But here what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to switch out of my decorations, which these are primarily placeable images, and I'm going to be using the brush and the fill elements. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over into my brushes, and I'm going to go into my painting tab. From here, we have two elements in most of the painting types of subtools. And so in this particular circumstance, I'm going to be using the ellipse tool because I want a round element here. And I'm going to grab one of these walls and I'm going to place this as my stroke. And you can see that immediately that is now shown as the cursor image over here, allowing me to know that this is what I'm going to be using to create that stroke element, which is going to be outside of the fill. So when we switch the swatches to the fill element, I'm also going to be going into my fills here. And I'm going to use this stone roof. And all of these are seamless textures, which means that there should be no issues with it, regardless of the size that it is made at. So let's grab this and drop that right into there. Now I'm going to be using the grid space here. We got to make sure that we turn this grid off when we export the image, because basically I'm going to make sure that we turn this grid off when we export the image, or otherwise the grid will also be shown in that image, and I do not wish that. But I am going to be using this grid to maintain certain continuity between the top-down image and the forward-facing image. Switching back over into my paint tab and making sure that I do have the ellipse selected, I can use the Shift key to maintain a certain amount of consistency, or it will guarantee that it is a perfect circle. Otherwise, I will be able to make ellipses of any sort of shape. I can also use the Control key, and I'm just going to use my Control key right now with the mouse wheel to make the image that is going to be my stroke a little bit smaller here. Now, holding down Control also will allow me to snap to the grid. And I'm going to hold down Control and Shift to maintain that and to create a top-down image here. Now I'm going to move this over so that we can line this up and size this accordingly with our grid here. And as you can see here, this is going to be, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 by 9. And I think that's probably a pretty good size. Moving back over into my grid, I'm going to be turning this off. And I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow to this before I export it with an effects layer. Create a new Adjust Colors effects layer. And I'm going to turn this all the way down at the beginning here. And I'm going to create a mask. With this mask, I will be able to paint out whatever shadow that I wish. And I'm just going to do a little bit of a one so that this wall element around the top will create a nice little shadow here. And we'll blur this out a bit. And now I'm going to increase this to wherever I want my desired element to be. Let's make that a little bit darker because I'm going to add a little bit of blue to this. I just want it to feel a little bit more natural on the outside here. I'm going to go back in and use Shift and Alt to take away a little bit of this in here in the middle. I want this to be a little bit more tapered on the edges, and that's pretty good. Now from here, all I need to do is press this Export Image to File. And I'm going to be exporting this as a WebP file. You can see I already did a test image of this. So I'm just going to overwrite that, and we're going to hit Save. What Fantasy Grounds now does is it will export it into my campaign folder, and I will need to refresh this to get the new image. This can now be used inside of Fantasy Grounds. This can now be used in Fantasy Grounds in the object system, where we have a top and forward image element. Now, before I move on, I'm going to be going and making the forward-facing element of this. Now I'll be creating the forward-facing element of our tower. Remembering that our other element is about 9 by 9, which is not necessarily something that we have to be consistent with, because we can change that when we add it to our object. But in this particular circumstance, I'm going to make it a little bit easier on myself. And so I'm going to take this Immersive Strongholds tower decoration, which is this base 2. And I'm just going to drag and drop this into my image workspace. You can see that this is normally 4 by 9, but I'm actually going to make this 9 by 20. And I'm going to make it a little bit shorter, however, about half the height. That's a little bit too much. So let's make it something like 15. That looks pretty good. Again, I'm going to drag this element onto, but I'm also going to be using it in the painting mode here. So I'm going to use it as a stamp. I'm going to drag and drop this in here. And again, this is about the correct size, but we're going to make this a bit smaller. That's still a little bit too large, maybe something like 6. And that's looking pretty good there. And I'm just going to stamp that right on top. You can see that that immediately creates a new painting layer for me. And I'm going to paint on the rest of my elements here and create a nice little collection of images to create my own tower. And this is going to be, again, the forward-facing element of the object that we're creating here. Next, let's add some windows to it. I'm just going to type in window, and here you can see we have a grouping of different types of windows. Something along these lines. And here I'm going to use the control and mouse wheel to change the size of this, and I can use shift to also change the rotation of the image. I'm going to place one here, and I'm going to flip it, rotate it the other way for the other side here. Now with this one, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to hold down R, G, and B, and I'm going to lower down the opacity here to match the shadows. And you can see that that's immediately going to put this into a context that's very easy for us to identify which area is lit and which area is in shadow, maintaining image consistency. If I want to move these around, I need to only go to the edit area, and these little points here are able to be interacted with, and these can be moved even after the fact. Now, the great thing about doing it this way is that if I do need to change the entirety of all of these images after the fact, I can do so. I could go into my Layers tab, and I would be able to interact with this, squashing it or changing these around as its own individual layer. But I'm going to keep them as they are for right now, so I'm going to hit Control-Z to undo that move. Let's go back into our Layers tab here. Excuse me, our Painting tab. And now I'm going to add a door. Here you can see that we have a whole bunch of different doors here that we can use here. I think I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to drop it right in here. And you can see, again, we have a small issue with our shadows being a little bit inconsistent. I'm actually going to fix this with an effects layer. And I'll create a new effects layer with an adjust colors. I'm going to just change this a little bit and then add a mask. With a new mask created, I can hold Alt and I can paint out the area in which I want the mask to affect. Now, I really don't want this to affect anything in the background here. So what I'm actually going to do is hold Shift and Alt and just paint some of this stuff away. I don't have to be super precise, but I can zoom in as much as I wish. And now I can adjust this brightness and it will only affect those areas. I'm also going to blur this out a little bit. And I can come back in and further adjust this. And you can see we're adding a little bit of extra shadow on that side for some consistency here. I think, again, what I'm going to do is just add a little bit blue to this. And it doesn't have to be exactly correct, just somewhere in the same area. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of scene dressing and add some foliage around the bottom here. So I'm going to actually leave this art pack and I'm going to go into the Immersive Woodlands. I'm going to our decorations. And here we have a whole bunch of different elements that are bushes and rocks and trees. Let's add a little tree to this. Again, I'm going to go on to this painting tab. I'm going to go back into our stamp tool. And I'm going to grab this decoration. I think we'll put it on this side. And I'm going to undo the aspect lock. And I'm going to just make it a little bit more narrow. Something like this. And let's drop down its height just a little bit. And we'll drop this down to something like there. Because this is under our adjust colors layer, I can always go back in and add in a little bit of shadow on this side as well. Now you can see that's a little bit too dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move a lot of this away. Increase the blur amount here a bit. And make it a little bit lighter. That's looking pretty good. I could do the same with some other rocks and some other elements to really bring this to life, but I think this is going to work pretty well for what we're doing right now. Now all I need to do is go to my export. I'm going to switch to a WebP, and here we have Tower Top, and this I'm going to call Tower Front. Going into our home area over here, I can go into my campaign and refresh this folder. We now have this. Now these are of approximately the same width, which is kind of what we want. Closing down the image creation workspace, I will open up our test space, and we're going to add in a tower here. I'm going to go into the Layers tab, Object. We have our top. And here we have our front. Now this image is quite large, so we're going to move this down a little bit, and I'm going to do all of this from the top view. Make this a bit smaller, and we're going to place this over here. Now, by adjusting this size, we may need to come in here and adjust this size as well. And as we begin to create a very cool little area here, we can constantly readjust these. Do we find something that is appropriate? Great, now we've made our own element. Thanks for watching.